what I'd like to do is just start with December 7th, 1941, really, and what you were up to on Pearl Harbor Day. Were you in the service then?
Yes, been in for a year or so.
Had you?
Yeah.
What were you doing?
Flying B-25. Had gone for flight school, and then had a tour at Lowry for a year or so, and then I went to the 17th Bomb Group at Pendleton. Well, actually, it was at McCord, and we never got there. We went on maneuvers, and yeah, so we had a busy time. Started out here at Lowry in the school squadron, the 37th Bomb Squadron. We flew the bombardiers and navigators that were going through school there, or being trained there, and we were part of the 17th Bomb Group, which was one of the Air Force regular groups, and we'd been detached from them.
Okay. So on December 7th, where were you that day?
7th, I was in Los Angeles, in Hollywood. Let's see, in Hollywood.
Really?
Yeah. We'd been on maneuvers in the southeast part of the United States, and we're on our way back to McCord or Pendleton, and we stopped at Marchfield, and our group commander said, "Take the night off, or take the weekend off, fellas." And so we just headed for Los Angeles, and there we were. And I think it was the Hollywood Plaza Hotel, if memory just refreshed me. We were having a pretty good time. There were our squadron, I forget how many of us there were, that most of the officers and some of the crew members, but there were quite a few of us. And somebody knew somebody else in the Hollywood Plaza, so he set us up, and we all gathered there. And from then on, I can't remember correctly.
That's good. Probably better.
Yeah, but the Sunday morning when this thing erupted, December 7th, this person we knew, I don't know how this happened, but a friend came and picked us up in a Marmon Phaeton, big, long touring car, Marmon. And my crew, and there must have been 10 or 15 of us in this thing, and we headed for Marchfield. Got out to Marchfield, got in our airplanes, and started north. And en route, we were told to stop at McClellan. It's now McClellan. Stopped there, and we picked up machine guns in boxes because we had no guns in our airplanes. And then went on up to McCord, and we were told not to land there because what was going on. And we landed over at Pendleton. It was a chaotic day. Is that a good word, chaotic?
Yes, you can use that.
Yeah.
How long or how soon was it after then that you began flying training missions for the raid?
Well, we went out on, we did some patrol to see if we could find the Japanese fleet. And this was December. Well, it was in January sometime that we left McCord, or Pendleton again, and started to the southeast part of the United States. As individual airplanes, and my 37th Bombardment Squadron was told to go to Columbia, South Carolina. And we did. First we went to Wright-Patterson, landed at Patterson Field. And I'm not sure what happened. It gets pretty foggy.
A few days.
Somewhere in there we had an interlude where we went to Minneapolis and put boots on our airplanes. boots. And I don't know why. And then we finally got to Columbia. I haven't renewed this sequence for a long time, so I can
You're doing all right.
be an error, well, in my own way. Went to Columbia, and what did we? Then we went down to Egland, and we first thought we'd go to England. I think it was. We were there were a bunch. The world was full of rumors,
Sure.
but then we went to Egland, and there we met. In fact, at Columbia, we met General Doolittle, and he said he had this special mission. He wanted somebody that wanted to go, could volunteer, and he'd be happy to take us. So we volunteered. That's when we went to Egland. There were 20 crews. And there again, we had the airplanes, did some things to them, modified them. We didn't have any idea where we were going. They took some radios out and put some radios in and took the boots off the wings. And I forget, we did some other modifications.
What was your when you first met General Doolittle? What was your first impression when you met him?
Oh, I knew of him because I'd gone to the Cleveland Air Races when I was a youngster, and of course he was part and parcel of that with the GB and his I forget the other airplane he flew, and he'd set those records. He flew the one of them from the West Coast to the East Coast, and the first time it had been done in under a certain number of hours. Then he flew the GB at the air races and had a marvelous little airplane. So I knew that of him. I knew about him. And we'll get back to where are we now? We're in Egland. And he comes down and meets us all and tells us he has this mission that was going to involve some special activity. And he said, I've laid out this runway on one of the alternate strips, and you're going to have to learn how to take off in a very short length of time. And here's how you do it. And he showed us how to do it, and did it. And then we went out to this alternate field at Egland and practiced that maneuver. And also he told us that we were going to have to go a long distance, and he had these special tanks put in. And we practiced long-range flying. We see how far we could go on an ordinary tank of fuel to find out what the consumption was of our particular airplane. And they had mechanics there that modified them and put new carburetors on them and did some other modifications, and we were able to really know the airplane by the time that this was all over. Is this what you want me to do?
Did you, at this point, you talked earlier about how the world was full of rumors at that time. Was there a lot of talk amongst you about what the heck you were training for?
He told us to forget that. Just don't worry about what you're going to do. We'll do it. That's about as close as I can come to what he said, maybe exactly what he said. And we knew we were going to do something different because we were practicing these short field takeoffs, and we had a competition to see who could take off in the shortest distance of time, shortest length and shortest time, yeah, that's time and distance. And that got to be sort of a intra-squadron, not intra-squadron activity. We had the 4 squadrons of the 17th group had crews there. And so we were getting the airplane down to where it could take off in hardly anything, maybe 400 feet and sometimes 200 feet. And it was a very scientific operation. We'd load people in it. One crew'd do his thing, and then he'd get in somebody else's airplane, the whole crew, another. So we'd have 10 or 15 people in the airplane, and boxes of ammunition, and it wasn't a precise thing where you loaded up the airplane as precisely as you could. Center of balance, center of gravity, center of anything didn't make any difference, just take off. We only lost one airplane, and that was just, he just mushed in. Didn't hurt him. And we found out we could get the airplane off in hardly any feet, just pop it right off the ground. And we found that we could fly it a lot farther than the book said, and perhaps twice as far.
At what point did you join the carrier?
Well, that's when we left. We left. Trying to think where we left to go to Alameda. We went to McClellan. The 20 airplanes that were scheduled to go on the cruise went to McClellan, and then the next day went over to Alameda. And this is after we'd done all this carrier and short field thing. And we got to Alameda, which is a miserable airstrip right on the wharf. And here's the carrier Hornet sitting out there just a few feet away.
What was the name of the plane you flew off the Hornet? Do you have a name?
Fickle Finger. The Fickle Finger.
Did you draw straws for who flew for the order off the Hornet? Or?
No, we all had the airplanes modified, and then as they became modified, we flew over to Alameda. I was the engineering officer for the whole thing, so I got over there last. And I don't know, I taxied out on the wharf, and they were getting ready they picked up one airplane, the one ahead of me, and put it on the thing, and so I just taxied up there, and they put the things in the wings and put me up. And so I was number 12, and 13, 14, and 15 were right in back of me. They hadn't fired their engines up. So that's the order. That's all, the way the order worked was, if you were there, you got picked up. Just to tell the story, though, the whole bunch of us went into the San Francisco that night to the top of the mark. Somebody else knew somebody at the top of the mark, so we all went to the top of the mark and sat there and watched those B-25s that had been hoisted onto the Hornet swing around as that Hornet swung around in the moonlight. And there was no doubt that there was all the speculation we'd had internally. We knew where we were going. And the next day we went down, got aboard the Hornet. And there was General Doolittle and Captain Mitzer, and they said, "Then, gentlemen, we're on our way to Tokyo." After we weighed anchor and went under the bridge. After we got under the bridge is when they made that announcement. Well, of course, I think we all knew that, but we just didn't know just exactly. After that, that's what you want me to do, is go on?
Now, I read something that said after the announcement was made on the Hornet that the entire crew of the Hornet erupted in pretty good cheers.
Oh, yeah. There wasn't no tears. The tears were back there I don't think there were any tears. I think all the wives had departed long since. And the girlfriend before that, I guess, if we had them. And we had them.
So you had a pretty good escort, the Hornet did.
We had the Enterprise. We picked up the Enterprise, and we had 4 cruisers and a gaggle of destroyers. And we went on the 40th parallel, and we just steamed straight on out to Tokyo.
Now, I know the weather starts to get a little dicey as you're getting closer and closer, and especially actually, it seems like, from what I've read, that there were some pretty good seas coming across the deck, and
Worst the Hornet ever had. The worst seas that the Hornet had experienced were the day we took off. And it was, we should have written that book, Piece of Cake. Have you read that book? It's a story about a Brit in England, and he had a commander who would send them out on a mission every morning to beat the Germans, and he'd say, "All right, gentlemen, let's go. It'll be a piece of cake." And somehow somebody had read that, and that always I used that word forever, a piece of cake. And that's what it turned out to be for us, piece of cake.
as you're getting closer and closer and closer, are you getting knotted up at all? Are you getting anxious to get off this, or?
I was ready to get off the carrier. I had a wonderful suite of 2 bunks on the farthest forward place you could sleep, right at the anchor. And I can't think of that lieutenant's name that was in this bunk. He let me have the upper bunk. He said it's more stable, and I was bigger than he was, so I could get up there, I guess. And no, we weren't. We had lots of.
Were you briefing every day?
Briefing every day. We had all this material that had been gathered by. Who was it? I forget who it was. Jack Hilger. And somebody else went up to the archives in Washington and gathered all this information that General Doolittle that somebody had said was going to be, could be used. I don't know the secrecy of it. They were able to get these things without too much trouble. And we had that on board the carrier. And we studied these pictures of these albums. In fact, I have one of the albums. I snitched it. I don't know how I got it. Some woman had gone over there as a missionary and brought this album back. And I don't know where I got it, but I have it. It's pictures of Japan and Tokyo. And these documents that we had, some of them were just photographs and albums and not much at all on Japan. We had sea charts of the sea in front of the island of Japan with all the fathom markers on them. We didn't have any detailed maps whatsoever. We had some pictures of, I was to bomb Yokohama, or Yokosuka, and we had a picture of the naval shipyard taken from some cruise boat, I guess it was. And that was the detail we had of Tokyo. Some of the other people had some maps of the city, but most of them were taken by tourists. Not hardly any taken by we had the attaché who'd been in Japan for a tour, and he described the place to us. And we'd ask questions about certain things, and he could describe them in detail, and it's a photographic picture I had of the target I had.
So
and we went 40 days and 40 nights. No, 18 days.
It's supposed to be April 19th, but the Hornet encounters, the convoy encounters some Japanese ships.
Yep. And we take off in the morning of the 18th. At 8:30, 08:30.
Ship's bouncing pretty good.
Pretty good, yeah. If we hadn't had a rainstorm, I would have had reduced visibility due to sea spray on my windscreen. But we went through some showers, cleaned it off. Now, what do you want me to do? Tell what we did?
Well, just, yeah, let's talk about that day.
Did you have any hesitation about going off the deck in those
Not
kind
at
of
all.
weather conditions?
No, I was number 12,
You're number 12.
and we just, Travis Hoover's number 2, so he followed the general off. We just moved our airplane forward. As one would go off, we'd move up forward and come to a line, beam the bridge. And
I understand from the wingtip to the tower, the bridge, there was about a 4.5 feet
That's
clearance
all.
in there about,
that's all.
so you had to keep it on the line.
Well, yeah, we got up ahead of it as far as we could, and
Sure.
then, which is easy then. We didn't really. I think well, after Travis went off, after the boss went off, it was obvious it was going to be again a piece of cake. And the big problem was trying to get up to where you could do that.
Mhm.
It seemed to, as I remember it, it was not easy. But once we got in position and they waved us, Admiral Miller, Hank Miller, gave us the wave and off we went,
Just like you practiced it.
just like we practiced it. And 4 hours later, there was Tokyo, and
Smooth flight there.
sure, yeah,
Weather's not bad.
weather was good. We stayed down on the sea. We didn't climb up. We climbed up as soon as we saw land, and broke across Tokyo Bay, and here was the balloons that surrounded Yokosuka. So I just got above them and dropped down, and
Encounter any anti-aircraft or?
I don't recall it. My gunner, Waldo Byther, shot at a couple of balloons, I think, or he fired the guns. And I don't recall that we had any. We saw some airplanes, or were airplanes flying around.
Mhm.
We never did see any of our B-25s. I never saw another one.
How far from the Hornet, did you fly at all as a 20 or 16 plane formation?
Not at
Or
all.
You just,
Single airplanes. Each fellow took off, and on his heading, 240 degrees, took off. And throttled back to 125, 135 knots, miles per hour, 120 knots. Just kept the airplane at that speed for 4 hours or
no
more.
radio communication.
No, it didn't have that. No. Didn't even use the intercom, just kept the radios off. The engineer came up from the back end after he'd set the fuel line so that the fuel went from the tank to the main tank, pumped it into the main tank, then he came forward, and off we went.
Getting back where you're actually in the bombing raid at Tokyo or Yokohama, what was your target? And did you have any resistance over the target? And did you actually know if you'd hit anything?
Well, the target was the shipyards, I think. No, I didn't know whether. Well, yeah, Waldo was in the back end, and he said, "Yeah, the bombs went off. I don't know what we hit. They hit dirt. They didn't hit water." So we'd gone over the shipyards and dropped them. And we dropped them on, we had a little tin bomb site that we'd made because we weren't allowed to have the Norden. And so Waldo dropped them, not Waldo, Duquette was in the back end and said that they'd gone off, the bombs had gone off. And the fire bombs, they had two clusters of fire bombs and 2 500-pounders. And yeah, we dropped on our target, which was the shipyards.
You didn't have the Norden because they didn't want
Didn't want them
anybody to be
captured.
able to get it.
Yeah, and we were going to be low level anyway, and it wasn't any good down there.
Sure.
Dropped our bombs and went on back out to sea and slowed that bugger down again to almost a stall, and flew for 14 hours and some minutes. and it got dark. And we climbed. Well, then we climbed up above the overcast, and were in it for a while, and then on top of it. And we didn't know how high the mountains were in Japan, really. So we just got on top of it and flew until we ran out of fuel, and then jumped out.
That was 14.
14 some hours, I'm not sure now. Almost 15 hours.
Did you have any real idea when you got to the point where you ran out of fuel where you were in China?
Well, Bill Pound, my navigator, I knew when we crossed the shoreline, though we didn't see it. You could see the change in the clouds, from the sea clouds up to higher level clouds, and we were in those for a while and got on top of them. And then he did his DR, and when it came time to jump, we jumped, and we were about 6 to 7 miles from where we were supposed to be. How did that happen? Who knows? we weren't very far.
And so that is pretty remarkable.
Yo, Bill Pound, he went to war with me. We stayed to war. He went clear through Africa and Italy with me. He's quite a guy.
Yeah, a guy like that, you wouldn't want to lose, I don't think.
No, I didn't want to.
Guy get you that close, for God's sakes.
By the other thing was he knew every song there ever was to sing. He could start a party quicker than anybody. Wonderful man.
So it's dark when you bail,
Yeah.
and you come down. How close with the rest of your crew? I mean, are you immediately?
We were not too far apart. There's a little story in there. Walter Byther came out of the nose and popped his parachute. And so I remember looking back, and here's Waldo with this bunch of silk in his arms, and he just packed it back in that thing, and I don't know what he did, but anyway, when I said it's time to go, he pulled the cord and out he went. Parachute in his arms, and yeah, wonderful. I think he should have been given a medal for that.
I would think.
You think about what it takes to get a medal for heroism.
Yeah.
There's nothing that was heroic for him to do that. He didn't hesitate. He went out. But he lived a ripe old age. He was the oldest man, second oldest man on the mission. Third, Doolittle, Hilger, and Waldo. I think Waldo might have been older than Hilger.
How old?
Oh, no, I don't remember. No, he was pretty old.
So.
He was an old GI, Master Sergeant.
No, he had been around a while.
Yeah,
So you bail. You're in China.
yeah. Soaking wet. Soaking wet. Had a dry package of Lucky Strikes. I had a carton down here, and they left. I kept my pistol. It slipped down. I caught it with my toe. I remember that. And for all these years, I've wondered how I got my leg up in the parachute to get that darn belt back up. And I kept that. I still got it.
Yeah.
Still have my pistol. My dad had it in World War I.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think it's ever fired a shot.
How long was it till you encountered the Chinese?
It was early the next morning. I woke up on top of a hill, I don't know, a couple 3,000 feet high, with an escarpment that sloughed off, and I walked around and looked down. I could see some activity, but I couldn't see people, see some smoke. So I just crawled off the mountain. It took me all day to do it. And I walked down a trail, and I met a man, and I don't know, I remember his face, but I can't remember what he did at this stage of life. But he was friendly, and he took me down the road a little bit, and there was a group of houses, and they took me in, and put me by a stove, and it's amazing to me that they were so kind. And obviously it didn't look like a Jap. Well, shortly after that, my crew came together. They'd been picked up, so we were strung out, but not too far. I don't know how far. It couldn't have been more than 2 or 3 miles. And we all got together and got warm, and they fed us rice, boiled eggs, and we were told not to eat anything but boiled eggs. So for a couple of days, that's all we had was boiled eggs and rice. Yeah.
How long did it take you to get out of China after you'd been?
Not too long. By the time everybody gathered at Lishui was the name of the town. They put us in a cave outside of town. Jack Hilger, the general had met some missionary or somebody, and he got word out and got out right away. I think he had to get to somewhere where he could announce the fact that we'd survived. And Jack Hilger his crew and my crew got together right away. We all survived. And then pretty quick, most of the other crews, with the exception of Hoover and Don Smith, and now I can't remember the others. They were on the coast. They ditched rather than bail out. And those that were captured, of course, 8 of them. But anyway, we were out in friendly hands within a couple of days. We had walked, I guess, 2 days before we got to where there was a car. Of all things, it was a 1940, a 39 Plymouth. It was a good car. This was in 40. This was a 39 Plymouth. Somebody had it. We met some missionaries, and they took good care of us. And then we were taken by somebody from the military embassy, our embassy, to a safe haven, Kunming. I think it was Kuilingham Kunming.
Kunming?
Kunming. And then from there on, we went to Chongqing, and as the story tells, we met Madame Chiang Kai-shek and the Generalissimo and stayed in their quarters and ate their food, and then we went on to India, and then came on home on Pan American. Pan American
A
won.
couple of things. At some point, you're told this is a one-way ticket. Yes?
I'm not sure if anybody ever said one way. We had these fields in China. We aren't coming back to the carrier. We knew that right away.
Right.
Hell, we knew that when we got on board the carrier, that this was a one-way trip, for that matter. But we knew we had a safe haven if we could get to it. And getting to it became difficult after we all had to bail out. But it worked out well.
And at what point when you get back home do you realize that people are pretty amazed at this thing that you've been a part of?
When I saw the headlines. Of course, getting back home wasn't the simplest thing, because, as I said, I came home on Pan American Ones, C-47s, and it took a while to get from Accra, from India all the way back. And we didn't have we had a ticket, and I made a speech somewhere here a while back somewhere here in this area.
Yeah.
I don't know where it was. And I left those tickets on the counter, and they've gone to somebody's collection or wastebasket. Anyway, Pan American bought us a ticket. We bought the ticket. Somebody gave us some money. The embassy gave us each a packet of money, and we bought our tickets. And then, oh God, we got home by the way of Brazil and Miami. Came home on a flying boat. That was an interesting 4-engine, 3-engine flying boat. This fella, he'd feather an engine, and we'd fly for 2 or 3 hours, and he'd unfeather it and feather another one. And I'm not sure, I never did find out why. It was a fuel consumption thing, I think.
Sure.
We made it.
So you get home, you see the headlines.
See the headlines, yeah. And then things developed. And that was about the end of June. No, wait, May. End of May. And guess where I was on the 8th of November, or 8th of September? London, England. Guess who met me? J.H. Doolittle. Yeah. The Hoover, Bauer, Don Smith. Oh, I should know how many crews. We all were given a squadron, and at Columbia, South Carolina, and brand new crews out of flying school, brand new B-25s, and we took off from Charleston, South Carolina, Columbia, South Carolina, and I took my whole squadron across the northern Atlantic and had them at Bungay, St. Edmunds, England, by the 8th of September. And I don't understand it. And the crews were right out of flying school. Some of them were maybe 6 months or a year out at the most. I don't think any of them were a year out. Yeah, two of them were a year out. And they were the flight leaders.
We're actually going to take an event that happened later and move it first, and that is what is now known to history as the Doolittle Raid. For those of you that are in the class, the attack at Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941, it was important to President Roosevelt, it was important to the leaders of the military at the time, it was important for American public opinion that we somehow showed that we were capable of retaliating quickly. President Roosevelt approved the plan, which became known as the Doolittle Raid. There were 16 planes that were aboard the USS Hornet. I'm going to let Bill get into that. Bill was the pilot of the number 12 plane that day aboard the Hornet, and it is a great thrill for us to have him with us today to share what is one of the single largest events, if not for its instant result, what it led to after that. So please welcome Bill Bauer, who is with us today. Bill, there you go.
I'm up?
Yeah, you're up. Stay right there.
I sit here, I'm up?
You're up. Now you need to hold that real close too, almost like you're kissing.
Am I on it now? Who's got the hand?
We'll get you there.
Well, I'm a little amazed. I didn't think I was going to be on for quite a while.
No, we get right to the big
Yeah,
stars.
I'm
right
glad
away.
of that. I don't know where to start.
I'll get you started. How about that?
No. Well, I'm Bill Bauer. I'm 87 years old next week, and I'm a Air Force aviator since before World War II. It was a goal I set way back when I saw a fellow named Lindbergh come into the country and had do some wonderful things. And he came to place near my hometown and landed the Spirit of St. Louis, and I went up to see it. And I was set then. I knew exactly what I wanted to do in life. I wanted to be a pilot. And it took me a while to do it. But I succeeded, and I went to flying school in Randolph Field, Texas, the west point of the air, and became a pilot in 1940. And this is ramble now. I haven't prepared this. I then came back to Lowry Field in Denver and joined a bomb squadron there that was training people how to be bombardiers. We had a bomb site that was quite complicated called the Norden bomb site, and that was something that you could drop a bomb in a tea kettle or something like that almost. In any event, I flew there for a number of months and then came to like Denver and thought it was the place I'd want to be if I ever came back to the place, if I'm going to have to leave. I met a wonderful woman, and the Air Force took me away, and we went on some trip around the United States to learn how to fly a bomber. And then along came December 7th, and on December 7th we were at Marchfield in California. In fact, we were in Los Angeles at the Hollywood Plaza Hotel. We were having a big party. And we left, we got back to Riverside, got in an airplane, our airplanes, and flew up to McCord Field in the northern part of the United States. And from then on, it was 1 3.5-year shamble. I was just a young fella, 23, 24 years old. I'd learned how to fly a high-performance airplane. In just a few months, I was a member of a group of airplanes of all young people. Hardly any, I think the man that was my engineer was the oldest one in the bunch of us, and he was 38. But the group of us assembled and went to England. We flew our airplanes over the northern part of the Atlantic, up over through Greenland, in places that I'd never even thought about, down to England, and joined the Battle of Britain, which was going on then, and this was the altercation between Germany and Britain. Stayed there for a little while, and then with the Americans and the British and the French, went down to Africa and invaded Africa and went from Casablanca clear across the whole continent of Africa to Cairo, with stops intermediate for a couple of years. It was an interruption in my life. Though I was doing the thing I wanted to do, would be an aviator, it wasn't the kind of an aviator I thought I wanted to be. It was to spend your whole life at war, without home, without family. And as a result, I made it. That's about all I can say. I can end it right there. To learn to fly an airplane was the main thing in my life, and I continued it until 1968. Enjoyed a wonderful life, had some harem-scarum problems, had a few accidents, but I made it. And I think that's what I'd like to present to you tonight, that you all ought to have a goal and stick to that goal as close as you can, and that, to me, is the way to succeed. I suppose the main part of this little adventure of mine was the fact that I met a person named Jimmy Doolittle, and he had come to our station down in South Carolina, and said he had a special mission that he wanted to perform, and he wanted some volunteers. He wanted 20 airplanes and 20 crews. And he took us to Florida and taught us how to fly these airplanes and what to do with them, and hadn't really said what we were going to do. But then sometime later we went out to the West Coast and we got on board the Carrier Hornet. Now these were large military B-25s. It was a large airplane. You probably have seen one around here somewhere. There's still some of them in existence. Put 6 or 20 of them on board the or 16 on board the carrier, and we steamed out across the Pacific on the 40th parallel for 18 days, having left San Francisco and gone under the Golden Gate. It was announced by the captain of that ship, Mark Mitcher, that we were on our way to Tokyo. Of course, having done quite a little bit of training, we knew we were going to do something special, but not quite what it was. We went on for 18 days. On the morning of the 18th, we were discovered by a Japanese boat some 400 miles off, or 600 miles off Japan, so we had to take off. We took off a lot earlier than we wanted to and a lot farther out from shore. But anyway, individually, we went in with the 16 crews, and our airplanes went in and bombed targets that we'd selected, and then went on down to China for another 13 hours. This was an airplane that was supposed to fly 4 hours, and that was the range, 4-hour range. And we'd pack gasoline to every rook and cannon. We had 4 bombs. The rest of it was gasoline and cans, tin cans of gasoline that we used to pour into one tank so we could, and then get rid of the tin cans. But we stretched that 4-hour airplane into 14 and a half. We got to China in the middle of the night instead of daylight, so we had no place to land, and we found that the weather was bad, and we climbed up over on top of the weather, each airplane, and bailed out. And jumped out of the airplane, landed in China in the middle of the night, soaking wet, in low quarter shoes like these, not GI boots. The next day, we were discovered by the Chinese, fortunately, and bless their hearts, they took us under, all 80 of us. There were 80 of us. I quantify that, but some of them didn't quite make it. They helped us out of China, and we finally got back to the United States a month later, having bombed Tokyo, the first time that the island of Japan had been, or the country of Japan had been attacked by an enemy in its existence in 4,000 years, so it upset them quite a little bit. And if your history class lets you know, they took it to us for a long time, and we took it right back to them. Well, to wind this up, I don't know how to tell you, but we made it. We lost 8 people. We had several of them were captured and were prisoners. 8 of those that were captured, 4 of them came home. They were badly handled, tortured for the whole time. One of them, Jake DeShazer, that I'll mention briefly, was a son of a farmer up in Oregon, and he joined the service to be whatever they could make him, and they taught him how to drop bombs, and he was just a simple soul. Well, he fought the Japanese after they captured him. He didn't give up, not one day that he didn't fight them. Took him to task every day. I can't describe how he did it. He would have to do it. But they beat him, they tortured him, but he survived. And he came back, and he thought, when I come back, I'm going to go to teach those Japanese. They can't be bad. And he came back and went to college and became a minister, and went back to Japan and taught the Word of God to the Japanese for 41 years. And I think if I say nothing more, I've said what the Doolittle Raiders did. He was one of them. How about that? That enough?
Well, we're going to fill in some holes now, all right? Because you just went through a pretty significant event in 5 minutes. I think we'll do a little more on it if you don't mind.
I have the mic.
Since I got you here.
You've got a mic.
We'll let's go. First, let's go back to the training at it was at Eglin Field, right?
Yes.
Now, okay, you learned how to fly a B-25 a little bit different than you had originally been
That's
trained.
right. That's right. It usually took 1,500 to 2,000 feet to take off, depending on the load. And we took off a fully loaded, overloaded B-25 in less than 400 feet. And that was just a matter of using everything we had and the help of some wind from the carrier, that we were on the carrier. And we took off in a short distance and leveled it off, and we flew it 14 and a half hours for a 4-hour airplane, so we learned how to handle it.
In your training, though, it became, you mentioned earlier, it became kind of a competition amongst you to see
Oh,
who
yeah.
could do it in the shortest
That's right.
distance, quickest.
That's right. Yeah, that's typical of American. You got to be competitive or you don't get along.
What about your crew? Did you handpick your crew?
Well, yeah, they were in my squadron, and I'd flown with them. Yeah, I handpicked them. I didn't. Well, they volunteered. I didn't ask them to volunteer. We were all volunteers. We weren't assigned. We were volunteers. And I took them. They were good.
You get your training. You head to California. You end up at Alameda, which you told me isn't much of a landing strip.
That's correct.
And you see the Hornet.
That's correct. And we went to we went to Hollywood Plaza Hotel and did what all good aviators do. We had a party. I may be old, but the memory's still there. Yes.
So one by one, these B-25s are loaded onto the Hornet.
Right.
You're number 12.
Right. Yeah.
16 of them.
16.
And away you go.
There we go. We had nothing to describe Japan. Believe it or not, at that time, 1940, we didn't know hardly anything about the place. The only things we had that described Japan were picture books that Japanese or missionaries had brought back, and the occasional map that somebody had smuggled out. We had very little to describe what Japan looked like. In fact, most of what we saw, we had to explain to people when we got back of what it really was. But that's another story.
So as the Hornet gets underway, as you leave California, you're not too far out, and then the announcement is made aboard the
correct.
ship where you're headed.
Yeah, all right.
And I understand, I mentioned to you earlier, that history tells us that the crew reacted pretty favorably to that announcement.
They were all for us. The Navy crew, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. They even let us have. We could go buck the line to get food.
Yeah?
Yeah, you don't ever do that. We've all been taught in the service, never sign your name or buck a line. If you don't know what buck a line is, it means if you're sitting in the front row, you bucked a line. Right?
Yeah?
Yeah.
So as you're making this 18-day crossing, then you're having briefings every day?
Every day. Every day, something about Japan.
What is General Doolittle saying to you during these days?
Well, he didn't say very much. I don't think I don't know. I can't remember what we did. We played a lot of acey-deucey and provided the naval crew with most of the money we had. That's a fact.
That's why they were letting you buck the line.
Buck the line.
Money.
Well, that was at the table. Oh, yeah. We were, well, I don't know what else to say. We were just a bunch of aviators that were doing what we wanted to do, be aviators. And we had a leader. Jim Doolittle is, to me, I'd seen him at the air races in Cleveland in the 30s, and he flew these wonderful little airplanes that were hardly fit to fly, the GB, and a couple others. He flew the first flight from the Pacific coast to the East Coast in one day, flew from the East Coast to the West Coast in one day, which nobody else had done. This is some of the things he'd done. He did all sorts of things with airplanes that had never been done before, and including the one that I joined him on. Wonderful man. Of all things, he went to MIT and got a doctorate in aerospace engineering. First one in our history. And just made an airplane do all sorts of things. A wonderful man. Then he took Am I supposed to talk about this, or do you want me to talk about the
No, go
raid?
ahead.
The wonderful thing about him is that he came back and became, and General Arnold, who was the chief of our Air Force, gave him the task of being the commander of the 8th Air Force in Europe. He took people and molded them together, and they wanted to do what they were trained to do. They weren't backsliders, and I hope that none of them here would dispute me on that. When he wanted to go somewhere, he went, and you went with him. And it was just a wonderful leader. And fortunately, I got to know him for the rest of his life, and hunted with him, and fished with him, and flew with him, and what else? Just a wonderful man. Read his history, an amazing Mr. Doolittle. And what he'd done for aviation, for our aviation. Just a aside here, in an airplane, if you ever fly one, there's an instrument, a round thing, it rotates like this when the airplane moves. It's called an artificial horizon. And a man named Sperry invented it, but he wasn't getting anywhere with it. But Jim Doolittle took it, put it in an airplane, a single-engine airplane with a hood over the thing, and made the first blind landing, first blind takeoff, and the first blind landing that had ever been made. And from that, now we make them every day. Anytime you go on a flight, generally somewhere along the way, the crew's going to have to make an all-weather landing. But Jim Doolittle did it first, and went on to do all sorts of things with airplanes that just projected us into this air age. What else?
So the way this is supposed to work, April 19th, you're supposed to launch from the Hornets on your mission.
Yeah.
But late on the 17th, early on the 18th, some Japanese vessels are sighted. They're destroyed, actually, but we're not sure if they were able to get radio transmission off before they were destroyed.
We're ready to go.
So it's now moved up. Under ideal circumstances, you're going to be close enough that you can complete your mission and then make a landing on mainland China.
Yes. Yes.
But now we move up to 8:30 in the morning on the 18th.
Right.
And it's not likely that these planes are going to stretch that far to make the mainland.
No, we're well beyond our range. As I said, we put gasoline in tin cans and put them in the back. You know, these little tin 5-gallon cans, we put maybe 10 or 15 of them in the back of each airplane. And that was our reserve, or extra. And we just, General Doolittle had told us how to fly this airplane to the minimums, that you could get down to the slowest speed above stall, at the most power that you could get out of the engine, at the lowest RPM, and just wean it down to hardly any fuel consumption, just down to where it shouldn't be. And we did. We made the mission, and went on to China, and we stretched that airplane almost to 15 hours for a 4-hour airplane. So it was a way to get home. It's a way to get home.
On the morning of the 18th, not only are you dealing with the fact that you're leaving a whole lot earlier than you were supposed to, but the Hornet's in about the worst seas she'd been in.
That's right. Yeah. They said so.
They got waves breaking over the
bow.
Over the flight deck.
That's correct.
And that's the conditions that you take off in.
That's right.
You time the takeoffs as the bow is rising, right?
That's right. To push you up the air.
You've got
I wasn't going to go into all this detail.
We're going to go into it. This is the meaty part here. This is the good stuff. Your wing is 4 feet from the
whatever you call that thing, the conning tower.
Yeah. Those Navy guys.
Are there any Navy people here?
Oh, lots of them. You can't ever get rid of all of them.
Well, I never got back. They didn't want me back.
So Doolittle goes first.
Right. Yeah, we had 400 feet of the deck, 800 feet. The ship's 800 feet long, and we had just forward of the bridge that goes up, because our airplane was the wingspan was too much to get it close to, to get it close to the tower. They didn't want us to get close to that bridge, what they called it. So we had 400 feet to go, and there's a wonderful book you ought to read called A Piece of Cake, written by a British person on going to war. And I adopted that because General Doolittle made this thing a piece of cake. And that's why I say we all taxied up to that line and took off, and it was a piece of cake. Does that stop it?
4 hours.
I can't get him stopped.
I know. You're on your way. You're flying solo.
Yep.
Single plane.
Right.
How far off the water are you?
Well, we stayed right on the deck. I mean, this is where we could get the wind. We knew what wind we had. Wasn't any way to check the wind up high because we didn't have the famous Norden bomb sight. So we just stayed on the deck. And that kept us from the Japanese seeing us. And we went. Now, you want me to tell me what you did next?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, we broke landfall 4 hours after we left the carrier. We'd hoped we could have been in closer than that, but we broke at about clock time. It was noon. We turned across Tokyo Bay and found our target, as the other ones did. Each of us had an individual target. And we went in a stream. We didn't see each other after we'd taken off. We went on our way individually. I found my target. I dropped my bombs and went back out to sea. And about 11 hours later, found China covered with clouds. So climbed up over the top of it. And because we were early taking off, we were late when we got to China, and it was dark and weather was bad, so we climbed up on top of this deck of clouds and waited until the engines quit and jumped out. And there we were.
Had you ever jumped at night?
No, I never jumped, period. Never jumped again.
Ever?
Never. That's not what an aviator's supposed to do. My bombardier was a grand old soldier named Waldo Byther. And somehow when he came from the rear of the airplane or the front, I'm not sure where it was, he popped his parachute. He had a chest pack, and he popped it and it blossomed all over the inside of the airplane back there. And here we are about ready to run out of fuel, middle of the night, and I looked around and here's Waldo with his parachute in the little space we had back there, trying to pack it back in the thing. And I guess he got it back in because all of a sudden he said, "I'm ready to go." And he pulled the handle and the door went out and he went out with it. And so the rest of it jumped out. And Waldo landed ahead of us, safe and sound. Just goes to show you to have faith in what you're doing. Well, now what? Anyway.
So now you're on the ground in China.
In the middle of the night.
In the middle of the night.
It's raining.
Soaking wet.
Low quarter shoes.
And none of your guys ride around, do you?
Nobody's there, and we find. I found a friendly Chinese person who smiled at me, and we'd been told if a person smiles, if a Chinese person smiles, he's friendly. Well, he was friendly, and I don't know what his thoughts were, but he led me to a house, and I went inside, and the people put me down in a chair, and they fed me some hot tea and some rice. And later on, it got dark, and eventually my whole crew came into that building that the Chinese had picked us up and brought us in. And we were of the crews that took off. There were several of them that were captured in that same area. The Japanese owned the area, but they just owned it during the daytime and not at night. So we were successful in evading them. Unfortunately, some of our crews were captured and had an awful time with the Japanese. 4 of them were executed, and a couple of them died. But the rest of us were evacuated by the Chinese and were able to get to India and their friendly country. And rather than go into the details of that, I can just tell you this, that after this was all over, the Japanese came back into that whole area of southeast China and killed 250,000 people. It's a matter of record. They just wiped out towns. Any town where we'd been, they'd kill the people, just wipe them out. And I can't believe it, but it's a matter of fact, and then you can read it in the history books. And so I'm not really sure how you take something like that as a participant in it. I've been honored. Like tonight, I'm here telling you about what we did, but I also am going to tell you that the Chinese suffered for it. But it changed the war. It changed the whole pattern of the war, and as a result, from the book, we got to work and beat the Germans and beat the Japanese, and it was a different time, I guess. Maybe I mentioned this earlier. I got home at end of May and sold some bonds and in a parade or two, and in the 8th of September, I took 14 B-25s with brand new crews and went up over the Greenland and down into England, and and in November went on down to Africa. And let me tell you, that's one a young career kind of goes into the wind when you have to do things like that. So I hope we never have to do it again. We've done it a couple of times. Let's not do it again.
Did you ever have to bail out again?
No. Crash landed a couple of times, but never bailed out.
Did you ever go back to China?
Yes, I've been back to China. I went back to the place where I bailed out and took a picture of the sign of the town, Lishui, and went into the town where they kept us for a while and retraced some of the steps that we took to get back to friendly Kunming, to the town of Kunming, and then to Chongqing. By the way, to revert back to that, life was rather simple. This group of 80 people, those of us that were able to get to Chongqing, were guests of the Generalissimo and Madame Chiang Kai-shek. And Madame Chiang Kai-shek cooked breakfast for me. Well, and some of the others. But she got eggs from somebody, and we had fried eggs. And we'd been in the same uniform for many days, and pants had shrunk up like this, and we were a disheveled group of aviators. But she was such a kind person and a wonderful person, and so was he. And you ought to study China and what the Chiang Kai-sheks did to bring them into the world.
When did you reunite with General Doolittle? When's the first time you saw him after the raid?
Oh, I guess a couple of days later, yeah. Saw him briefly, and then he took off. Next time I saw him was in the United States.
Did you, before you got back to the States, did you have any idea what a big deal you guys were?
No, we didn't. We knew that there was trouble because they kept moving us out of China or back towards Chongqing, and the Japanese were chased us. I remember they strafed the train we were on several times. That was an unpleasant situation. The engineer would blow the whistle, and we'd all jump off the train and run into the grass, and the Japs would come over and strafe the train, then we'd get back on it and go again. It was that kind of a life for a while. So the event, well, I guess I simplify it, but I got back home, and there was no doubt that the people in the United States were refreshed by it or renewed. And then on the other hand, General Doolittle came back, and it was obvious because, as I said, in the 8th of September, I was in England. So we didn't quit. Now, where am I again? Back where I was.
Yeah, we're doing pretty good here, actually. You're doing all right. For an older guy, you're remembering a lot of stuff here tonight, aren't you?
Well, I haven't, never have written this story out. And of the 17 of us that are still alive out of the 80, I think generally we have to do this, don't have to, like to do it several times a year. And it's ad lib for me. So don't write it out as history.
Was this, out of all the missions you flew in World War II, was this Doolittle, just thinking back, was this Doolittle raid the most harrowing one that you had the whole?
No, I don't want to go into the rest of it. I was in Africa from September of 42 until September 45, and flew several missions.
Africa and Italy?
And Italy. I had was a group commander, and I'm not sure that I can tell you that it was anything but a torture time, because every time a mission would come back, you'd count the airplanes. Then you'd count the ones that would land with a flare. And you knew somebody had been injured or was dead, and so that went on, and you wondered when it was going to stop. From Casablanca to Cairo, with Rome in the middle. So that was, and I don't know why I stayed over there. I guess it was, well, I had lots of friends that stayed, and it was what you had to do. And Jim Doolittle stayed. He was somebody to follow.
Did you, when you came back home, did you meet the president?
Yes. Yep. And Eleanor Roosevelt.
She cooked you breakfast?
Cooked us breakfast. Oh, that was Madam Shank,
Yeah,
I said.
I know.
Yeah. It was a simple world, and I'm far enough along in this, I think I better quit.
Well, one last thing, and we'll let the kids ask some questions if they have, students ask some questions if they have
Goodness,
questions.
all these people.
Well, they're gonna go later. They're all here to watch you. Is what you did in any way, shape, or form heroic?
I don't think you tie that to it. If you're doing what you've been trained to do, and you're comfortable with what your job is, and you make sure that the people that depend on you are taken care of, I don't think that's heroism. That's just a task. You can tie to it whatever you want to. It's only after it's over that people tie words to it that are not comfortable.
In a couple of months, the 17 remaining, those that can make it, will be down in Tucson for your annual reunion this year, and it's down in Arizona.
Yeah.
A lot of war stories?
Oh, no. No. No more war stories. Fun stories. We always talk about the fun. You know, the funny thing has happened, like, how are we going to, I can't tell it. No, we had some fun times in the midst of it. All these people that had been, a lot of it wasn't all bitter. It was good people. You learned, you had fast friends that you can call anytime now, and got in touch with you, and you mourn when they die. Lost my best friend just recently, Travis Hoover. We started out together in 1940, and we went all through the war, and he went farther than I did. He was a warrior. He did his thing in the B-25s, and then he went down and joined the 15th Air Force and flew one mission in the B-24 and decided he didn't like that, so somebody checked him out in P-38s, and he became a wingman in the P-38 group as a colonel and flew some more missions with the P-38s. And I didn't go that far. But Travis and I we started out in flying school. We rented a house in Denver 2669 Dexter, and we each had a new car. There were 5 of us, and we had to go to Lowry every morning, and we'd terrify the police on the way out there. We had tickets, and the neighbors. Anyway, we were quite a bunch, and we all went to war together. And Travis and I went through the African campaign and the Italian campaign, and we've been. It's just great to have friends like that. That you just have friends. And he passed away the other day, and so that breaks that cycle. But I don't plan to go with him yet. No. Any other questions?
Any of the students have questions then? For Colonel Doolittle? Any
I think
questions?
I've been on long enough, haven't I?
Oh, you think you have?
Well, whatever. Yeah, they're quiet.
Yeah, it went for Christmas, 30 Seconds Over Tokyo, and I wonder how much the movie was really like what happened.
It was pretty good. Fairly close, yes. I have seen it. I just, yeah, it was pretty good. I don't know where it, well, Ted Lawson was, and Ellen Lawson's still alive, and I tell you how close we are. I call Ellen every other week or so and chat with her, and she and Ted had that romance that was fictionalized, and there's no doubt about it. They were a couple, and they lived till Ted died, I guess 50 years or so. We had a couple of long-term marriages. I've been married 61 years to the girl that I came back to meet in Denver. And yeah, I don't know how I got on that, but no, I mean, I don't know what brought that up. But we're bonded. I think, I don't know how that affects people that weren't involved in the same thing I'm talking about. But we made bonded relationships that have pertained. And I could say, I think this is a fact, that of the Doolittle Raiders, I don't think there's one that's ever gone through divorce court. I'm sure of that. And there are 17 of us left, and I think 30 widows. So something happened to us, and of course Jim Doolittle had a wonderful marriage. Married Joe Doolittle, married her on Christmas Eve 1917. She died on Christmas Eve 71 years later. Can you imagine? He died before that, but she died on their wedding anniversary 71 years later. And what a wonderful family. And they did so much for all of the youth of America, and the airplanes wouldn't have been the same if it hadn't been for Jim Doolittle to get them up, and Joe Doolittle went right along with him. And it's a wonderful family. If you can read the book about them, it's worth it.
Here's what we're going to do at this point. We're going to stop it there. We're going to take about a 10-minute break and come back with Pearl Harbor with the 2 gentlemen seated to Bill's right. But please, Bill, thank you very much. What a great story. Thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Better off.
So we'll take 10 minutes. We'll reconvene at 10 till 7, and if you'd like to, I'll keep Bill down here for a second or two if anybody has any questions here in these 10 minutes. So 10-minute potty break. Off you go.
Well, I hope I hadn't talked too much for you fellas.